Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. Picture this. What would you do if a neighbor sent a patrol consisting of fake officers to your private warehouse to steal your property? This guy was a competitor and tried to ruin my car business. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. So the title story starts like this. Just to give a little bit of background, I run a car restoration business. We are quite successful, but at the same time we are very discreet, so it can look a little unassuming from the outside. We operate out of an unmarked private warehouse in a semi-industrial area, so it's definitely not the sort of place that you would expect to stumble upon a pretty extensive collection of high-end cars. However, it's also covered by a pretty advanced selection of HD cameras, motion sensors and silent alarms, so it's definitely not an easy target for the curious thief. I don't say all that to brag, but rather to make it clear just how absurd the following events were. You see, there's another business owner down the street named Rick, and he is a slick, unscrupulous man at the best of times. He's exactly what you imagine when you hear the phrase used car salesman. He's done pretty well for himself when it comes to swindling people to their faces, but I guess he got in too deep and ended up needing money to cover some debt. And by the way guys, my apologies if I still sound a little bit sick. That is because, well, I'm still recovering from COVID. But anyway, that is really the only rational explanation I can come up with for the insane scheme that he attempted. So to get to the meat of the story, a few months back I was working in the shop at night when I noticed something odd outside. I was not sure what it was at first, basically just a gut feeling, but then I realized that it was something going around the block at regular intervals. So these people were driving back and forth, which could just be someone lost and looking for a certain address, but it is also how drivers act when they are casing a potential target. The nice thing about having a whole network of security cameras is that you don't need to poke your head outside to check this sort of thing out. When I took a look at the footage, I got the oddest sensation. It was clear that this was some sort of private security patrol, and by that I mean it was really clear. Way too clear. In fact, they did not have specific logos, they just had security in bold font on the sides. It was so generic that it instantly set off every alarm bell in my head. Honestly, I would have been less alarmed if they were completely in unmarked white vans. These guys were definitely up to no good, but they eventually did leave, so I went home too after checking the security system 3 times for good measure. The next day, I had some employees do a thorough inventory to make sure nothing was missing. Everything seemed to be in order, but I decided to hang around a few extra hours at night to see if they might come back again. Perhaps they were the thorough and methodical sort of criminals, though their complete inability to blend in suggested otherwise. Sure enough, they came back the next night too, and they drove back and forth for a good half an hour before finally leaving again. At this point I was pretty sure what I was dealing with, and I figured it was better to take matters into my own hands rather than let them do whatever they were planning. The next day I decided to move a few very valuable, recently restored classic cars near the main entrance. It was impossible to see them from the street, but if someone did decide to break in, then these would seem like ideal choices for theft. They were right near the exit, so you really just had to steal them and slip right out. For the cherry on top, I also left the car doors open, mainly to ensure that they didn't do anything foolish like break the windows open. That evening, I had the employees join me in a secure back room where we could watch on the security cameras without really being in danger ourselves. Honestly, I had no way of knowing that the thieves were gonna pick tonight to make a serious attempt to break in, but luck happened to be on my side. After driving up and down the street only a couple times, our 2 criminals hopped out wearing masks and wielding bolt cutters. They clearly had a decent amount of experience under their belts because they got through the locks on the bay doors in just a couple seconds. Once they got inside, they immediately noticed the bait cars that I had put out, and just for a moment I thought they might be smart enough to recognize the trap, but then they made a beeline straight for the cars. They were visibly shocked to find the doors open, to the point where they did not even question their good fortune. In seconds, they had opened the warehouse exit, hopped inside the cars and made a break for it. The moment they drove off the property, I hit the silent alarm. Part of me had been hoping that they might have a change of heart so that I wouldn't need to get the police involved, but even at the time I knew that was a vain hope. Perhaps a little more cynical, I also wanted to make sure they were completely off the property before I hit the alarm and called in the authorities. That was because the alarm did not just call 911, it also remotely locked the cars down tight. That is right, they barely started down the street in their hot new merchandise before I killed the engines, locked the doors and turned their loot into dead weight in the middle of the street. I'd never had to use these kill switches before, but they were a marvel to behold. And just like that, these guys had gone from pure elation and marveling at their incredible luck to prisoners waiting for the cops to show up. Plus, their crappy security vehicle was still parked out there as well, and I'm sure there was even more incriminating evidence in there. It must have been a slow night because it only took the police a few minutes to show up. I went out and told him what had happened, but it was a pretty unremarkable conversation because it quickly became clear that these two fellows were not acting on their own. Instead, they just kept stubbornly saying that Rick, our favorite used car salesman, had told them to do this and that we should talk to him. I guess they thought that all the blame would go to their boss and that they would be off the hook because the very moment that the police pointed out they would go to jail too, they cracked and started babbling about exactly what Rick had done. It would seem that he had asked around for a couple car thieves and then furnished them with a fake security patrol vehicle and equipment. As far as these two knuckleheads knew, his plan was to have the cars delivered to his dealership where he would try to flip them as quickly as possible, ideally before I found out that they were there. I've no idea how he was planning to make these classic muscle cars blend in with his crappy selection, but I really hope he was not planning to scuff them up a bit to fit in or something. Anyway, I was not directly involved with what followed, but I do know that the police went to get a search warrant and then hit Rick's lot before he could even have a chance to hide all the evidence. At this point I thought I had a pretty good grasp of the situation. Rick was a greedy slimeball and he wanted to steal my cars to make a quick buck simply because they were there and he thought that they would be easy to snatch. However, when the police eventually did confront Rick, he started to tell a very different and much more ridiculous story. Apparently, Rick somehow got the idea in his head that I was stealing all his customers. As to how I was accomplishing that without any flashy advertising whatsoever, I have no idea. If anything, we anti-advertise and try to keep our clientele limited so we can maintain a reputation for fast, quality service. When I first heard his defense, I was shocked. Naked, immoral greed makes a certain amount of sense, but this was downright delusional. How on earth did he manage to convince himself that I was stealing his business? We were not even in the same market. Hell, I don't think there could possibly be a single overlapping customer between his low-end used cars and my high-end restoration services. But after thinking about it a bit more and hearing some of his wild explanations firsthand, it all made sense. Rick was just doing what he always did, which was spinning a wild, elaborate yarn that he thought would reel in a few suckers. He was desperate, plain and simple, and he couldn't stop lying and scheming to save his life. Not that his life was in danger, but his livelihood certainly was. The investigation didn't take too long, but apparently just a few days of police cars hanging around his lot was enough to scare off most of his customers and start a catastrophic spiral for his business. I can only imagine how bad his debt must have been if a little bad publicity like this was enough to make his dealership implode after just a couple days. I heard through the grapevine that the city was gonna go after him for multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit Grand Theft Auto 6 and for his attempts to sabotage my business. His two hired goons were included, of course, and I think the three of them all pointing fingers at each other did more to seal their fates than the mountain of evidence my security system had gathered. The police did take the stolen cars in for evidence, but when I got them back, I saw they'd been treated pretty respectfully and there was no damage. One of the owners was actually amused by the story of what had happened with his property. Shockingly, I didn't actually talk to Rick face to face until the legal proceedings were well underway. It was the first time we had spoken since well before the attempted theft, though I hesitate to even call this speaking. It was more like he suddenly leapt at me, begging for me to call off the hounds and get the charges dropped. He tried to tell me it was just a big misunderstanding, that he did not know the criminals who tried to rob me, and that he was going to give the cars back and just wanted to show them off for a bit and a dozen other contradictory things. Seriously, I almost felt bad for the guy. If it wasn't clear already that this guy was incapable of telling the truth, it certainly was now. He was looking down the barrel of years in prison, not to mention the unthinkable damage his reputation was suffering. You would think that a sleazy used car salesman could not get much lower in the public's eye, but Rick certainly proved that wrong. Even if I did ignore the proceedings of the court case, it was impossible to miss what was happening just down the street. It was swarming with what appeared to be creditors trying to repossess as much of his stock as he could. A few arguments turned nasty, and I heard it was because he actually promised some inventory to multiple lenders as collateral. If that meant he was also forging deeds and other documentation, well, I have no idea, but I wouldn't put it past him. As for my business, it actually got a nice little bump in the months that followed. Word spread about just how effective my security system was, so I got a few new clients that felt comfortable having me handle their extremely expensive cars. Everything could have gone much worse, but as it was, I cannot say I'm too broken up about how things turned out. And guys, before you click off the video, please stay, because the next story is one about another crazily entitled neighbor that you absolutely don't want to miss. It is titled, "Leave a Nasty Note on My Legally Parked Scooter? Well, get banned from parking in front of your garage." And by the way, if you're fortunate till here, please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. So years ago, I was at my girlfriend's house from about 10 to 2 AM playing board games. In San Francisco, it is tough to find parking, so I rode my scooter to her place and parked between two driveway cutouts on a curb that was approximately 3 foot wide. This is quite common, perfectly legal, and normally not a big deal. To be clear, I was not blocking their garage, but I did park between two cars parked in front of their garage. I have been to her 6-unit apartment building dozens of times and have seen there no parking signs on the building between the 3 garage doors in front of the curb area I parked at. I came out to my scooter with both vehicles still parked in the same position they were in when I arrived to find a note on my seat. I love the anger, sarcasm, rage and entitlement, so of course I kept it, and it is now placed prominently on my refrigerator for all to read. I appreciate this guy's effort and outrage despite being a petty note to leave. It kind of reminds me of something I might do myself, making sure I was in compliance with the law, however. The note, sadly I cannot share a picture of it. "I'm wondering if you're illiterate, have a poor sense of spatial recognition, don't care if your bike is damaged when I have to pull out of the space since you have not left me enough room to do so safely, or you don't care if you're sighted or towed. Move your bike before you are sorry. You ignored the no parking sign and don't park here again. There are many other available spaces for you to park." Well, the next day at work, I looked up parking codes in San Francisco, and it turns out you cannot park in front of your garage if you live in a building with more than 2 units, and you can only install no parking signs on a garage door. I then called SF311 and reported the situation, and the next time I went to visit her, the no parking signs between the garages were removed, and I never saw a car parked in front of the garage doors again. I only felt bad for the 2 other people who can no longer park in front of their garages because of this Karen/Kevin. And the next one is an absolutely amazing story from r/pro revenge, and it is titled, "Guy Quit His Job Thinking He Became Rich." So I'm new to Reddit, I thought I would post my story here. So I work for a construction company and we do remodeling on homes. We got a rule here that we get to keep anything we find hidden behind the walls. We hired this guy, we really needed a worker badly, who was a total a-hole from day one. I've been working for this company for 5 years, and this guy has only been doing construction for 1 year after he got fired from his accounting job for getting a DUI. Anyway, he would always make fun of my clothes and my accent, and one day he went too far by telling my boss about my private Instagram account, Pics. He got on my phone and looked through my Instagram and showed my boss pictures of me smoking weed. Little did he know that my boss is my friend from 8 years when we used to smoke together before we both quit. I was so mad that he violated my privacy that I made a plan to F him over. He was the kind of guy who would always come in late and complain that trains or traffic is why he was always late. Well, one day I overheard him saying that if he won the lottery he would quit his job for not getting the respect he deserves. By the way, you have to earn your respect here. Well, one day I bought some fake gold coins online and I put them in a metal box I found at the antique store and waited for a chance to hide it in the wall. Luckily, I did not have to wait long. The day he found the coins, it seemed like it was his best day ever. First thing he did when he opened the box, he called my boss a effing loser and he quit immediately on the spot. He said, "F this place, I'm rich." Well, little did he know that was the best day of my life. After he quit, my boss told us that he was gonna fire him anyways for always showing up late. I wish I could see the looks on his face when he finds out that the gold coins are fake. Best $40 I ever spent in my life. Anyway, the next one is titled, She Wanted My Baby. When I was 18 and in my first year of college, I got pregnant. The father joined the Navy to escape responsibility. My parents, who are strict conservatives except when it's inconvenient, abandoned me and cut me off financially. They wanted me to have an abortion to prevent the loss of my scholarship. That is how I found myself at 18 suddenly and totally responsible for myself and my living situation with no financial or emotional support from anyone. I lived at a private dorm and was befriended by the property manager Donna. When I told her my situation, she swooped in like a hero and helped me get a place to stay at one of the other properties she managed, since I was getting evicted from the dorm. She then helped me get a job at a gift shop at one of those properties. I thought she was the most wonderful person for all of this until her true motives became clear. She wanted to adopt my baby, even though I had expressed no interest in giving my baby up for adoption. After a few weeks of work, she launched a campaign to convince me that I was unfit to be a mother and that my baby would be so much better off if I let Donna have it. At first, it was subtle passive-aggressive remarks about how much money she and her husband had, how she couldn't have children herself, and how she hoped that she was able to adopt one day and what a wonderful life they would give their baby. But as time passed, her approach became more aggressive and direct. She was always around the shop and would even come to my apartment ready to point out things I did or didn't do, and that proved what a terrible mother I would be. She went into long rants about how awful I was for having a baby without a father, and how we would be welfare trash forever. How God brought her into my life because she was meant to have my baby. It was endless and constant for months. Sometimes I let her comments upset me and make me wonder if she was right, but in my heart I knew that I would be a good mother. For a while, and feeling intimidated, I let myself be bullied into including her in baby-related events. I even let her go with me to the sonogram, where I found out that my baby was a girl. She was so excited for me. As I got closer to delivering, I got stronger in making clear to Donna that I was not giving up my baby. I tried to avoid Donna as much as I could, but was regularly reminded how much power she had over my living situation. I soon had co-workers telling me that she was claiming that my baby's adoption was a done deal. She even told people that she was decorating a nursery and buying baby girl clothes. When it became clear that she was not gonna change my mind, she started threatening me with eviction from my apartment and firing me from my job. That way I would realize how unstable my situation was and recognize that I had no business having a baby, and sure enough, I lost my job. She fired me for not wearing my shoes behind the cashier's counter at the gift shop, and when I was on my feet all day, my feet would swell right out of my shoes. I'd stayed behind the counter and slip off my shoes for a bit, but never in view of the customers. Still, that was reason enough in Donna's mind to teach me a lesson. It did not take long after losing my job to also lose my apartment. I ended up couch surfing and even spent some time homeless until I got some housing assistance. In the meantime, I had gone to the EEOC and complained, and they helped me mediate with the owners of the gift shop property. As a result, Donna got fired from managing that property, and I got months of back pay and some extra money for my trouble in exchange for not full out suing them. This small cash windfall turned out to be a huge blessing that actually enabled me to survive financially until I had my baby and could get back in school. Donna firing me was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I saw her years later and she was still childless. The best revenge, my daughter is now getting ready to graduate full scholarship and magna cum laude from a top law school. Turns out being raised by a single mom is not as awful as Donna thought. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/petty revenge. It is titled, Wake Me Up to Say I'm Off to Work. So when my ex and I were first married, he worked a 12-hour day, 4-on-3 off job where he had to leave at like 3:30 a.m. I meanwhile worked a normal office job and had regular people hours. Well, on his workdays he would wake me up before he left to say that he was going to work and the obligatory "I love you." I asked him several times to not do that, as I would have trouble going back to sleep, but he just would not stop. So I started waking him up on his days off and saying, "Bye honey, off to work. Doesn't my hair look great today?" And that stopped him. And yeah guys, I guess sometimes you should not say "I love you." There's a place and time for everything. Thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.